So I will do a bit of an intro. Thank you all for being here. This was just for folks who had registered for either a Make Space Boring event. If you have not gotten access to the recording on Thinkific of the events, please go get them. I have emailed them out, but if you don't have the links or you can't find them or the email went to spam and disappeared, just email me at jason@goldstartech.com or message me on LinkedIn and say, hey, where are those? Because I didn't get as much sign up as I thought I would for that. And that was very interesting. And whichever one, if you just signed up for one, you get both anyway. You don't have to pay any more. So that is available for you, and those are great lectures. I mean, I can't think of a better way to get a snapshot of what's going on in the industry. So what I thought we would do, and again, I have no idea how this is going to turn out. This is an experiment. It's so weird to me with all the windows and everybody on them and that. And so I'm kind of going to let it go and see what happens. And if it works well, then we'll try doing another one at an earlier time to try and get some of the other folks who weren't able to attend today at this time. What I found was on the first Make Space Boring event, I decided to kind of go full Hitler and shut the chat down completely and just have everybody focus on the speakers. And I had a couple people say, hey, no, we want to do some networking. And I was like, well, I don't know, maybe next time. And then the second event, I let the chat be open, and we have about half as many people, which was surprising to me since I know we put on a great event and word should have gotten around and we had the testimonials and that, but I think people were just tired of Zoom. And I left the chat open and nobody ran amok, nobody did anything terrible. In fact, it hardly got used. So I thought, okay, let's host an event and see what happens. And if it's useful, then we can do more. And if it's not, then, I don't think it could be a waste of time really, as long as we're meeting each other. So really the big question for me is, how do you structure something like this? And I asked for some suggestions and I got a couple pretty good ones back. So the first thing I'd like to do is for us to go around and take a minute each. That shouldn't be too long, and say who you are, who you work with, what kind of problems you solve, and then who you're looking to meet. And that's not just, hey, I want to sell something. That kind of pisses me off, by the way, when I run into people who are just all aggression. Hey, we're all out to sell. I'm a sales trainer and I love selling, but I'm also very curious about other people and I want to meet people and I want to hear about who you want to meet. And so that second part of the email that I sent around today about I'm looking to meet is about who you would like to solve a problem for you, if possible. So I'll start. Mine will be super quick. So I'm Jason Canigan. I'm the founder of this thing, which is Cold Start Technologies. It's a data science and process improvement firm. So we work with company executives who are in the weeds with their business and they want a single source of truth. They want the truth. As a matter of fact, when I have big physical complex for this company, I'm going to have an atrium that the employees have to walk through every day, and over the top in large metal letters is going to be the words "the truth," and that's going to remind them of what we're here for. And so we use data science and process improvement as tools to solve those problems, and especially in the space field is who I'm looking to work with. I am looking to meet with investors who fund space companies or unfunded space firm founders. So that's it for me. And I think if maybe we'll just go around. Let's go in alphabetical order here. I think the participants list does it in alphabetical order. I'm not sure, but let's go in that order anyway. Hopefully the participants list will be the same for everyone. I'm not sure. I know the windows all appear differently, but I'm going to shut up now. Eldridge, on my list, you're next. And we get that by clicking on that participants button at the bottom of the screen.
Okay. So, should I start?
Yes, please.
Okay, hi everyone. Really happy to be here. Thanks, Jason, for setting this up. My name is Eldridge. I am from Angola. I have 5 years experience in the space sector. I've been certified as a senior specialist for the ground control in Russia. Currently, I'm in France, where I'm studying aerospace project management. And next week, I will be starting an internship at Airbus Defense and Space with the French Aerospace Valley. Currently, I'm also at Florida Tech and the International Space University doing the commercial space program with Dr. Aldrin. So my professional thesis for the next 6 months, during my internship, I'll be developing a new space ecosystem. So I would welcome any type of collaboration and help on this project. And I'm also available to collaborate on any project that you guys have going on. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. Mike, I think you're up next.
Okay, well, my name is Michael Maloney. Greetings from Phoenix, about the hottest place on earth right now. So I'm a founder of satellite design for recovery. I started this after a 30-year career working in the satellite business and working in aircraft collision avoidance back in the early days at Lincoln Laboratory, and did a lot of satellite work in the various companies at Lockheed and L'Oreal. And I founded this to get the word out that we need to start working on remediation of debris and working on a little better on mitigation and space surveillance and space situational awareness. So I'm writing on all these subjects. I have a blog post, satdfr.org on the web. And I'm looking to collaborate with anybody that wants to work on making debris remediation a reality whenever it does happen, because we know that someday it's going to happen and people are going to have to do this. And when they do this, we want those missions to succeed. And there are several preparatory steps that need to happen to actually make them successful, on top of the billions of dollars that it's going to take to do it. Anybody that thinks that new space is going to pay for old space's mess simply just doesn't understand space economics. As the OneWeb bankruptcy will clearly show, space is hard, LEO is harder, and debris is the one fundamental thing we need to overcome in order to actually have the space ecosystem that we're all thinking that we're going to have. We put Picard and Kirk in their chairs and we can't even launch through clouds and rain. So we have some work to do to make space the ecosystem that we hope it will be one day. So anyway, nice meeting everybody, and look forward to our chat.
Awesome. A lot of the people here are guests, they're alumni of the Cold Star Project. So if you haven't seen my show, it's on every major podcast platform for audio, and then on YouTube under Cold Star Technologies for the channel for that. Thank you. My next fella is Rocky Singh. Rocky, I know you as 11,1 from the first event. So I look forward to hearing about what you do.
So, my name is Rocky Singh, based out of Toronto, Canada. I work for two companies. The first is a multinational engineering services company, Larson & Toubro. They provide various services, spanning multiple verticals, anywhere from supply chain optimizations to VR offices to compensate for this whole COVID situation, to providing raw engineering, core engineering support in terms of drawing and system requirements. So that's the first sort of gig. What we do is we pair up with companies and help them optimize their flow process. The second is a startup, a space startup. We're attempting to do some regolith mining on the moon for the purpose of harvesting water as well as helium-3 for both terrestrial and lunar purposes. So I guess for the two sides, it's the creation of a network with other space-minded individuals and corporations. I'd like to get a space vertical started for Larson & Toubro, so give it a little bit more corporate firepower. While on the startup side, is to liaise with companies and academic institutions to just have a larger footprint in Canada for space.
All right, great on the timing. Carrie Reinhardt, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. You are up.
Hello, my name is Carrie Reinert, and I'm currently an undergraduate student at the University of Texas at Dallas. I'm studying international political economy, and I'm really hoping to go into space policy one day, or perhaps study the economics of space. And as you can imagine, I'm pretty new to the industry, still being a student, and so I'm just looking to learn as much as I can about kind of all of the different aspects of the industry, but especially I guess the environmentalism of space with debris, and also I guess other economic issues. But I'm excited to talk with you all.
All right, thank you. Daniel Tompkins.
Hi, I'm Daniel Tompkins, founder of Grow Mars, and we are exploring the potential of expanding loop life support systems. We're looking to meet the right funding and partners in this industry that we're crossing over from basically biotech. So we're relatively new. I went public about a year ago with a joint NASA publication, and looking to navigate and network.
All right, and you've got some papers that you submitted that are on the Make Space Boring resources page for the events, and those are interesting. When I first read them, I was like, okay, is this real? And then I talked to you, and I'm like, yeah, it's real. So
yeah, there seems to be the non-biodegradable bio-derived plastic that's clear has a lot of potential for life-sustaining kind of expanding loop system versus kind of that traditional closed loop system. So just kind of one of those things you stumble upon and keep grinding away at. So
okay, Janine Kutsonen. See if I remember how to pronounce that right from our interview.
Good morning, everybody. It's 6 o'clock here in Sydney, Australia. I'm actually retired from business, but I'm trying to make the link between the broader economy, because here in Australia it's a bit hard for the space industry to be really high level. So my special thing is trying to get girls into the STEM studies. So I'm working with a high school, and I'm really interested in talking to you, Daniel. I've bought the local girls' high school a shipping container, and they surveyed their campus and then paralleled where they landed that container to being on Mars for topography reasons. And then next year's progress, sorry, the cat's walking in front of me. The next year's project is they realise in situ materials use. So we're actually going to work with the local recycling companies and additive manufacturers for reusing materials, because taking stuff into space costs a lot of money, and you would want a circular economy with that. So if you have done work on plastics, we would certainly be interested. And then the next step is that my main thing is health. The parallels between geriatric health problems and space problems in terms of bone density, radiation impacts on the eyes and so on. So I'm going to be working with the aged care sector here in Australia.
Fantastic. And yeah, we'll get that interview that we've done out sometime in the next few weeks. Drew, let's hear from you.
Yeah, I work in cybersecurity in Seattle, and I also have do a lot of business in California, and I want to move more into just satcom cybersecurity. So if anyone's interested in that, love to talk. And I'm really just here to see what everyone else is doing. I'm really curious about the potential of space to expand its operations and businesses around the world to other countries like Angola and Africa. And Rocket Lab is an example of just a group of engineers in New Zealand starting a world-class space company. So I'm just here to learn about that. Thanks.
Awesome. Julie.
Hi, everyone. I'm really happy to be here and to hear about your past. So I'm in France doing a PhD in space law with an research institute in international law. It's been 3 years I'm in the space law field, and my thesis is about appropriation in space. So whether or not we can mine resources. And we are really working about the legality of appropriating space resources. So I would love to hear about that and interact with you on economics in space and space law also.
Great. Well, I probably know 20 space lawyers, which is a lot for the average person, I think. All right, let's hear from Marco. Marco, I have not really talked to you yet, but I see you with Eldridge all over the internet, so let's hear.
Thank you. Marco Romero from Angola. So I started very early at military school, then I joined to the Air Force Academy doing the aeronautical engineer degree and to perform some part of the career as a glider pilot. So I made the two license, and then I jumped to space to be certified in Russia as a ballistic and navigation support specialist for satellite operation. At the same time, I made the other certification in Japan and with the TSTI at the United States. And now, so during the past 5 years, I've been working on ballistic, space application and service on the research department of the Angolan space program. And now I'm finishing the advanced master at ISAE on space system engineering, where I've been working a lot with the topics like proximity operations, like developing low Earth orbit policing systems. And I'm focusing a little bit more on small satellites because in Angola, I'm CEO of 6 startups, 2 of them working on STEM education, related not only with space, but we created the national competition of robotics, aeromodelism, drones, and things like that on those 2 startups. And the other 2 are related to GIS and remote sensing, but applied not only drones. We are developing this aeronautical engineer applied to drones and using satellite imagery. The last one is animation and comic book studio. So we're developing some space education, comic books, games, animation, so cartoons, to teach kids about space, to teach kids about rocket science, and to build these rockets with them. And that's why we are now building, just to finish, we are building now a concept of an analog site in the southern part of Angola, because we have a very huge desert, the Namib Desert, we share with Namibia. And there are very good conditions. So we will start now with the Mars Society and the Moon Village Association to establish this settlement. We submit to IEC 2 papers about this analog, and we are now exploring this analog because the people who support us with STEM is from Namib. So they are transforming buses in schools and laboratories, old buses, transforming school, and they are supporting us and are engaged with us on those microgravity experiments, analog missions, small satellites. Those are some of the things I do in Angola: education, outreach, and space program development.
All right, thanks, Marco. Lots going on there. Dins. See, Dins can tell we're getting down to the last 2 here, so by process of elimination.
Hi, Jason. Hi, everybody. Yeah, thanks for putting this together, Jason. I'm Ralph Dinsley. Everybody knows me as Dins. I'm the founder and executive director of a small UK company known as Northern Space and Security, or NORSE for short, which is a developing space situational awareness organization in the UK. 32 years in the Royal Air Force, joined as an air defender by choice, but 16 out of my last 18 years I was actually in space surveillance by chance. And interestingly, I went to our space tracking site, Findingdales, as a choice to leave the Royal Air Force 21 years ago, and it took me 17 years to extract myself. That's how much space engages you, I think, when you get into this field. I'm here to meet people. I love extending my network. I love hearing new stories. And the beauty about the MSB series is the fact that it was such diverse presenters on both of the two conferences. It just covered everything, and that's a good thing. But one thing I'm here to sell, and I'm here to sell a concept. And that might interest you, Julie, and others, and Carrie as well. And that is the concept of the space law games. So we're sponsoring a PhD student through Northumbria University, and it's a fusion of military wargaming and moot court. So the whole concept is, the idea is the military wargaming is the complex scenario of the space event. We then extract the data we require for it to go into judicial process for a moot court. First game we're playing this summer is on a geo event involving a mission extension vehicle, but happening after the successful completion of that event. And then once we run the complex scenario, well, then we're looking at LEO and active debris removal. So we're looking for as much international support as possible. Space is a global endeavor, and the whole piece about it is the fact that there's a lot of actors collaborating together. But and the last thing we want is just the UK view on this is why we should have these law games. And the objectives of the law games is to highlight the significant gaps that there are in the space situation awareness field and in the space law field, and hopefully inform the regulators and the SST protagonists to actually do something about it, so we can actually ensure sustainable space. I've spoken for a lot more than a minute, and I'm more than happy to chat more later, but thank you for your time.
Right. Thanks, Dids. And I've talked to Dr. Christopher Newman. Those two guys are like that. You'll see them all over. I've done an episode interview with him that hasn't come out yet, but it will. And we've talked a bit about this. It's so strange to think if two space objects crash into each other, we don't even quite know yet whether there's enough oomph out there in terms of data and what we can say for sure happened to ascribe responsibility. Right? It's really interesting to think like this hasn't happened yet, and so there's a lot going on in space where we think we know, but it's when you do this kind of wargaming, we're going to highlight very quickly where the gaps are. So I'm really excited about this. There's a website for it that Chris shared with me, and I'll see if I can fish that out later and send it around.
That'd be appreciated. Thank you.
Okay, is Dr. Graham Lau, who is the most patient, and so I have forced him evilly to wait.
That's fine by me. Hi, all, I'm Graham. I'm an astrobiologist, so ever since I was a kid, I was a huge nerd for science fiction and the big questions about, why we're here and are we alone? So I went to college, I studied biology, chemistry, astrophysics, and then finally settled into a PhD in geology. And then also spent a lot of time learning about communicating science and sharing it with other people. And so for Marco, I've done a bunch of stuff too in public engagement and trying to share our passions, our interests. I've done a crew mission at the MDRS, the Mars Desert Research Station in Utah. I've had friends go up to FMARS, the Flashline Mars Arctic Research Station. Been involved in analog research a little bit that way. I also help run a competition every year out in Utah for students to build Mars rovers and bring them out to the desert and compete in a competition we give them. We have students from around the world take part in this. I currently work for Blue Marble Space in communications and marketing, as well as being a research scientist in the Blue Marble Space Institute of Science. And so I've got my hand in a lot of different pots right now. I'm working on a paper right now on some Mars-relevant geological structures in the Arctic for my PhD fieldwork. I'm working on a book chapter right now on the social sciences and how they apply to technosignatures and SETI. I'm also working on my own book right now on what weird biology on Earth can teach us about alien life. So looking at some of the really cool, bizarre creatures that live around our planet. And when it comes to communicating science, I'm a public speaker. I like to write. I really like creating artwork and graphic design. And I've always been lit up by those moments when you're talking with somebody else and you have an aha. Whether you're the person sharing the knowledge or you're the person taking in the knowledge, those moments are so crucial. And so I'm always happy to connect with anyone who wants to engage in those moments and help share those worldwide.
Great. I have a lot of fun talking with Dr. Lau. This goes for everyone though. Anybody who has kind of a news story for space, please contact me if you want to talk about it for a few minutes. We can jump on a video call and record like a 5-minute thing. I've done one with Dr. Gordon Ressler. I've done one with Dr. Lau that I just shared on LinkedIn again because I forgot about it and then reshared it. It got good traction though the first couple times we shared it. And these things, you know, they can come out and be shared a few times over the next several weeks. So. Okay, so here's the part that I'm scared of. It's the unstructured part. I don't know what to do now. I'm great with structure, but when it comes to just letting a bunch of people in the room, I trust that you're all responsible people. Let's all unmute. What would you like to do now? What do you think?
So Jason, I'd like to ask Graham a question.
Okay.
So we hear people talk about for the longest period of time, and science fiction has been written about it forever. So if we go to Mars, and it's considered to be the safe hold for the human gene. We get off the planet. We're not a single planet species. But if we get to Mars and we're no longer Terran and we can't come back, how does that validate our view that it's somehow an escape hatch for the human genome if it no longer expresses itself in the way that it does here?
That's a great question. I mean, there's that idea, right, of becoming a multi-planet species. The idea that we'll go to Mars and we'll develop infrastructure on Mars so that we're consistently traveling back and forth from Earth to Mars. But your question's an interesting one, right? Like what happens if we go to Mars, we create settlements, and then the Martians choose to remain Martians and don't want to be part of the Terran biosphere anymore? What becomes of them? And it's a great question because biologically they should then start slowly diverging from us as far as evolution is concerned. And maybe after some, tens or hundreds of generations might start appearing very different. And Carl Sagan and others have actually discussed this in the past. It's kind of an interesting question, right? Like what happens if we go somewhere else, like when bird species in the Galapagos went from one island to another, and then they never traveled back to the other island, and they started evolving and diverging. Would we humans diverge as well? And it's an interesting question that scientifically makes a lot of sense, but I mean, I think the big hope for all of us who want to get humans to Mars is that, it wouldn't just become a one shot and you're done. It'd become, interplanet exchange continuously moving forward.
Yeah, thanks.
Awesome. There is a guy named Dr. Jim Pass, P-A-S-S, who's a planetary sociologist, and I have tried repeatedly to get him to be a guest.
Astrosociology.
Astrosociologist, yes.
Yeah, I'm actually on the board of advisors for the Astrosociology Research Institute as well.
Well, Graham, if there's any pressure you can apply to him to come and speak on my show, I would love to have him on as a guest because that's a fascinating topic. It
really is. So Dr. Pass and I are working on that book chapter together about the social sciences and how they apply to this quest to look for extraterrestrial intelligence, specifically technosignatures. What happens if we get a message, and then like sending messages out? Who speaks for Earth? There are already people out there who are sending messages out. It's already happening right now, and there are people who are choosing to speak for us right now. And so it's a really important place for us to apply some philosophy and sociology and some consideration of who and what we are.
Okay, well, I guess like Mike just did, maybe asking each other questions would be a good place to start. I mean, the best thing we could do is learn a little bit more about each other. So.
I'm a big note taker, guys. I've been taking a couple of notes on what everyone kind of does to get an idea and feel. It seems we got a couple of groups of people. We have a couple of situational awareness / space debris, as well as the whole legal side of things, space law. I guess both of them sort of coincide in terms of work done by a gentleman named Moribaja down in Texas. I think he works for the Odin Institute. Jason, maybe you have some more, we can talk about that.
Space situational awareness. So, all right. So Mike here, I've done 2 interviews with him. That should tell you something. Mariba, I talk to not every day, but 2 or 3 times a week. I talk to him today, trying to help him with some of the back end stuff in terms of like fundraising, and because he has big goals, and I agree with those goals, and we need those systems in place. A lot of space situational awareness, and I don't want to pontificate too much here, but I will if I've left the room. So tell me to stop. Is you need to kind of decide where you come down on, like, how are you going to do this, right? Like there's an article that came out recently about, oh, we should charge a fee for everybody who wants to orbit satellites, and I think that's ridiculous. I don't think that taxing the problem is going to make the problem go away. It's systemic, and we need to get in at a deeper, more mental understanding level, like we did with recycling. I'm old enough, I'm 45. I remember when there was no recycling, right? And I remember when recycling came to, I'm originally a Vancouverite, Rocky. I lived in North Vancouver the first 34 years of my life. And I remember when those blue bins and green bins showed up, right? And there were two different kinds of garbage cans, and my dad was pissed off, He was forced to buy this big container that nobody asked for, right? The district charged him for it. And we had to just start to learn how to separate our stuff and use it. And I think, and of course, 30 years later or more, 35, it's ridiculous now. Like, who cares, right? We all just do that. We all just do the recycling in the countries where it's supposed to be happening, and it's just part of the mentality. So what I've seen, and Din's,
sorry, Jason, it's actually going to be supporting my project next year, because my local Campbelltown Council is required by the state to recycle 70% of the waste, because we're running out of landfill. And at the moment we only do 40%. So because I'm working with the local high school and going to get them to do material sciences, this in situ material use for the space project, they're actually going to pay for the project. So I think that the space industry really does need to look at how they interlink back to the broader economy, because space is tough and it's long term, and you do need some kind of financial business model to support you,
right?
And for the general community to actually get what's going on, and how what they're doing in their normal lives transitions to what's going on up in space.
I think one of the problems you have with the space community is just the fact that we have 60 years of history and we haven't cleaned up that mess. So if we start trying to tax people trying to launch into the new space, then it's a bit unfair. And I know a lot of the nations involved in the history of space are not willing to clean up the mess they've left behind.
Absolutely true. So Jason, can I take a stab at your space situational awareness answer to
Rocky? I mean, I have a lot more to say on that, but if somebody were to go to the Cold Star Project, watch Marie Bajaz's interviews, your interviews, Christopher Johnson's Space Law primer, that was just an amazing, like, from 0 to 1 understanding about space law. I think they would have a pretty good picture of what's going on and what the problem is. Go ahead.
I agree, and I think that there's this new term called space domain awareness. And if you look at the history of space, and I spent a year out in the South Pacific in a place called Kwajalein working on space surveillance many years ago. And I'm an ex-Air Force B-52 tail gunner, so I spent a lot of time flying in the military. So it's all came from the military monitoring of the space assets we had, and we never built enough of it. The space surveillance network has always been way behind the power curve in terms of our capability to actually monitor what's going on in space. So we're basically blind, and we've been trusting the luck because space is big. And you could trust space was big, and you could put anything up there, and you didn't have to worry about it. Those days are over. New space is not big, it's not unlimited. There is a actual limit to how much we can put up there, and we don't know how much of it we've already allocated to debris. So I like to say that space situational awareness is not a service. Everybody looks at it as, oh, well, we're doing this, and the Space Command folks, the 18th Space Squadron, they're going to provide this to everybody. Well, no, they're not. If you have something in space, it's your job to be aware. Like you're in an airplane flying it, it's your job to be aware of the environment. You're driving your car, it's your job to be aware of the environment. I remember the stories of the first people that got cruise control. They put the cruise control on and they turned around and started doing stuff. It's like cruise control doesn't work that way. Space situational awareness doesn't work that way. We don't see everything all the time and track everything all the time. So if you have something in space, it's your job to be aware of where it is and what's around it. So my view of space situational awareness is that you should be able to get the algorithm and the ephemerides from these people with a database and run your own conjunction analysis on your own article and monitor where it is and then decide whether you're going to maneuver it or not. and people who put things into space should pay for that situational awareness to be provided. They should bring the money to the space surveillance network to pay for the portion of the network of the time of their surveillance. And then also, whenever you're running the telemetry links, you should be reporting on its location, because if we know where it is, we don't have to propagate the orbit. We know where it is. We know where it's going. We don't have to worry about it. Those ephemerides are available. There's no more, well, I've got this uncertainty because I propagated the orbit and I have these covariance volumes that I need to worry about. I know where it is. And just like I can intercept ballistic missiles coming in and warheads, I can avoid things where I know where they are. So the more I know about the stuff that's up there, the better off we're going to be. So everybody has to share the location of their stuff. So we cannot rely on what we've been doing. We've been blind and trusting to luck, and that doesn't work anymore. It's not scalable, and we need a new paradigm going forward.
Right.
Back on that, sort of, I guess from a legal point of view, I guess more question for Ralph, Julie, and Carrie. What kind of frameworks are being put in place or discussed to either incentivize that cleaning up or as a deterrence? What's being discussed on that realm?
There's an awful lot of subjects being discussed around that realm. The legal framework, there's a lot of people that will advocate we need to rewrite the Outer Space Treaty, which is just unachievable. So my view is the power, for want of a better phrase, sits very much with the national regulators. And certainly in the US, there's a fear of the national regulators that get too restrictive sometimes and actually have hindered some of the space capabilities of the US when it comes to Earth observation, for example, historically, and even ITAR actually hampered the US space industry rather than actually supporting it the way it should do. So it's a really tough tightrope to walk on. And either side of that is the fact that national regulators are just looking at their national requirements. And nobody wants to take that lead. In fact, they look to the US to take the lead because of the US's history. And as we've seen, when it comes to supporting sustainable space, there's a political argument about does that sit with the FAA or the Department of Commerce? And it's mired in the US political system now, rather than actually something stepping to the fore and taking on the role. Sadly, it will take a collision for something to happen. It will take more debris for something to actually step up and do something about it, because there are greater risks terrestrially at the moment, and so therefore that's where the focus is. It's not like you can go out and step up and touch space objects. So people don't really see that as a future problem at the moment. And I would say, echoing Michael's piece about understanding the problem and tracking and predicting and everything else like that, there's too many people walking around saying the sky is falling in. They say debris is a threat. Well, actually, I argue that debris isn't the threat. The threat is commercial space, because debris is there. Whether it's man-made debris that we put there by accident, or whether it's natural debris through micrometeoroids and things like that, the debris is there, and it's the fact that we're overpopulating space that we're creating that threat. Because for something to be a threat, it has to have intent, and debris doesn't have an intent. It's a falling object, and that's all it is.
Well, I was just on a thing before this, and Dins was there, and there was a UK space lawyer we know named Christopher Newman, Dr. Christopher Newman, and he corrected me about what you just said there, Mike, about insurance not being mandatory. In England, it is, apparently, and I didn't know that. Space insurance had come up, and somebody had suggested, well, why don't the space insurance companies pay for the monitoring and all that stuff? And I was like, well, that's ridiculous. I wasn't that rude to the guy, but I said, here's how space insurance works, because I have my interview with Robert Weirdy of Marsh. I just don't think that's going to happen, but it is apparently mandated in the UK. So who collects the data, and who stores the data, who shares the data, who controls the data? This is really a big question with collision detection and prevention tracking. And guys like Marie Baja and Christopher Newman and myself agree that the right answer is to have a central database that, like an open source thing, basically, that everybody dumps their data into, and that you can pull out from, anybody can, rather than abdicating it all to an FAA or something like that, where there's, say, military control over the thing, and they're telling you, direct traffic, right? Move this out of the way. No, you should do that. So, Ralph, I'd be interested in hearing your comments on that if you're still here.
You're on mute.
And I'll unmute as well. Yeah, I was just switching that. So yeah, my personal belief is we need to democratize that data, as you said. Yeah, but the problem is the custody of that and being able to trust the validity of the data. Right now, the US Space Events Network provides a service, a very good service within their means, but I think we've long gone past the need for the military to do space events and tracking. They have their own requirement, and I sit firmly with they've brought out space domain awareness. Well, let that be the military mission, and let's have a civil mission of space situational awareness to be able to support commercial space, because governments want commercial space to flourish because it provides inspiration, innovation, investment in their countries. So therefore there should be some form of levy, and if it's national governments that are regulating the access to space, then they need to get together and sort out a civil SSA system. And I know some colleagues of mine in L3 Harris talk about a blockchain solution. I must admit I know very little about blockchain, so I won't go into that, but it sounds like if you have a custodian system that people can trust and it's easy access as long as people pay for it, then you have a good system there with blockchain.
Cool. And for those who are new to this, I must say, I don't think I'm a dumb guy, but it took me about 6 months to get my head around this problem, to really begin to understand it and all of its issues. And that was doing interviews and talking to these experts, right? So, you know, don't feel bad if it's like, wait, what are they talking about? It takes a bit to really start to go, wait a minute. And that's how I found Eldridge here, was I needed a ground station operator to explain to me how that whole section of it worked. That's yeah, we ended up connecting and doing that interview, which I think still has yet to come out as well. I've got like 20 interviews just sitting there. So let's hear a question from somebody else.
I have a question for Julie. You know, when people talk about space law, it's way too limited into just debris, collisions, and the moon. What else are we missing? What other topics are you guys addressing in this field that the general public is not really talking about, because we're just really limited to debris, collisions, and the moon?
We are also talking about the registration, you know, the registration convention. When you need to launch a spacecraft, for example, you need to register it. And we also address the issue about environment and how to have, at the same time, economy fostered, but sustainability. So, and we got a lot of international conventions that are not space law related, but still have an influence, because as Ralph said, the Outer Space Treaty is outdated, so we need to find in national regulations other solutions, but it's pretty much vaster than what we can speak. It's not limited to debris for sure, or for the moons. There's lots of questions as to whether, you know, the Outer Space Treaty applies, for instance, to the outer space in general and not only to the moon or celestial body. It's very vast.
Yeah, if I can jump in there too and add another question for that. I get this one a lot as an astrobiologist. So say Elon Musk and SpaceX take Red Dragon to Mars, and they pick up a rock and it has the very first sign of alien life inside of it. Does SpaceX own that rock?
That's exactly what I'm working on, and I'm trying to find a solution, and hopefully at the end of my PhD I will be able to tell you with certainty. But it depends, because some space lawyers can tell you that it is, because the Outer Space Treaty basically says no national appropriation, and they say private actors can take it. It's different. It's very hard to say, but if for instance Elon Musk would build something on a celestial body, it would belong to him, but otherwise it's hard to say. But maybe Ralph has something to say, or Carl.
Well, actually, yeah, I want to add to the mystery and the point of, you know, we talk about sovereignty in space, And if somebody like Elon Musk puts 40,000 satellites in a handful of orbital planes, does he then have sovereign ownership of that space? He certainly has populated that space.
Oh, it's an excellent point.
And
Right.
the distinction is hard, but we need to distinguish between property and sovereignty. And some have argued that sovereignty is for sure prohibited in space, but maybe some kind of quasi-property could exist in space, and you could own some parts of space without owning, for instance, a celestial body, and it would be okay.
I'll make a comment on the Elon Musk question, which is I think that the United States government would find a way to use eminent domain to take that rock away from him and make it a national asset.
Probably. It does beg the question, where do new ideas come from, right? I did a lot of volunteer work with the city of North Vancouver back home in my late 20s and early 30s. And there were different levels ideas could come in from and be turned into legislation, right? You could have the public. You could have guys like me who were appointed to boards, and I got the terms of reference changed for our committee so we could kind of wag the dog and send stuff up to council. Before I'd been on there, they could send stuff down to us and say, comment on this and tell us what we think. Staff could do something, so a city manager or something like that, or head of a department could use their influence. Council and the mayor could do something, and then also senior levels of government could impose on them from above and say, do something about this, or you have to follow these things. So, and we've got the same thing going on here in space that I recognize, and so you've got operators, you've got local governments, you know, you've got your states, and you've got things like the United Nations, and then the outside things like the radio frequency thing, right? That's an entirely different issue all by itself. So, who's got a question? Carrie, I think you have a question.
One thing that I will add that probably some of the gaps that are being explored are some of the illegal launches and the illegal activities. We have a lot of more and more strange activities, like we have like the Shijian Chinese satellite, the Look B, some of the Cosmos strange activities near other satellites, and we have like this uncertainty of the ITAR application rules when we are talking about anti-satellite weaponization. We have more and more demonstration of this weaponization of space, but you treat this under the scope of ITAR rules, or you are working on that like a space asset. So because you have this mix between intercontinental ballistic trajectories and space launch license. You were talking a little bit about this constraint of the UK legislations in terms of insurance. Yeah, we have the example of the Space B startup or company, where they just launched their almost 31 satellites with the ISRO. They told them to not put their names associated with those payloads, and in fact, these launch were considered illegal launch, and but you could directly put them paying this bill because they didn't register, and the launch was registered by ISRO. So those are some of the things that are being more and more trying to be solved, because even for illegal activities on space, you need first to detect them. And to detect, you need to develop space systems capable to make these proximity rendezvous, and to be able to deny this mission, or at least avoid during a certain amount of time. So this is a mix between technical issues and legislation issues that are more or less, because you have this on-orbit servicing. What is the limit between proximity operation that are a threat for your satellite and a servicing that is being, it will be provided to your satellite. So is a mix between both, and we are getting more and more deep on orbit servicing, but also proximity, illegal or suspicious activities.
That's really interesting. Oh, I was going to say thank you for all that insight, Marco. It kind of, I guess, connects to a question that I have, which is when we're looking at more, I guess, sustained exploration and settlement of space, I was curious if anybody knows if there's infrastructure for how laws on Earth will carry out to laws for civilizations like in space. Especially when it may be corporations that are establishing like all of the infrastructure, you know? So if there's like a multinational corporation that establishes a base on a moon or a planet, whose laws are that citizen or are that settlement citizens under? Is there going to be like a new code of laws? I was just wondering if anybody knows.
There's actually teams of people that get together and discussing this all the time. There's a series online you'll find through Eventbrite. I can't remember how I got involved in it, but it was called Moon Dialogue. I'll try and dig out the link I've got and send it later. And they sit and discuss it all the time. Linking up with something like Chris Johnson of Secure World is ideal because he will know. He has, like Chris Newman has strands of everything. I know Chris Newman's involved in it as well. There's a number of people out there that are participating in those discussions. A couple of PhD students of Chris's have formed an organization to discuss those very factors, and they reach out quite globally as well. So again, I can get you links to that as well, and that will help.
I know here in Australia, they're a husband and wife who are specialists in space law, and we have, if you contact the Australian Space Agency, they will be able to refer you through to, because they have formed an international legal group for that kind of thing.
And we have also what we call, is not directly related to that, but is probably someone here can talk more about that, is the Asgardians, like a community that they have a government well established and recognized. They have I think almost 10 to 12 ministries, a lot of citizens. They are like outer space civilization, organized and recognized. Probably I'll just launch this to have from your side, according to Carrie's question, because it's the step between having a permanent settlement on outer space and these pseudo civilization that we have here on Earth, but they have like these onboard virtual upload of all the register of the citizens, all the Asgardians.
Cool.
It's kind of interesting. So I mean, I'm an Asgardian, you know, quote unquote.
Yeah.
I mean, what does that really mean? You know, like I've signed up because I'm a space enthusiast. I've always wanted to go that route. But what is the actual impact of Asgardian law, or I guess any third party or group of peoples that want to get together and make rules and regulations? You know, what is the takeaway for it all? It's an open-ended question. Feel free to jump in.
Yeah, I don't know if from what I could understand very briefly, is their intention to first recognize and establish in terms of legislation what could be the common living in outer space. So creating at least the first approach of what will be a community way of living in outer space. Their first experiment, so it was creating all these country infrastructure, so like community infrastructure, like a country with a well-recognized ministry, a flag, well-defined requirements on what we call the international community. So in terms of international community, you have the basic requirements to be recognized as a country. And I think until now, what they're trying to do is to establish and to define all, to achieve all those requirements to live in outer space. That's why they launched like a small satellite with all the registered, all the information of every single citizen to space, and to have like this first country in outer space, what they call it. So what I could understand without extending too much is they're making this effort or this exercise to establish in terms of international community requirements this country in space. The same thing we have here in terms of borders, lander, maritime, and aerial borders. They are redefining these up to the outer space scale. Yeah. And yes, with all those inputs of international community, multicultural, multi-racial, and multi-everything way of living.
What is not easy that in the Outer Space Treaty, it says that the spacecraft and the personnel who is in it belongs to the states who is launching, on which the spacecraft is registered. And also if, let's say, a country built a structure on a celestial body, this structure and only the structure would be under the jurisdiction of the state.
But we have two things. I don't know, probably I'm taking too much time of antenna, but with that, exploring resources, we have, for example, in the case of asteroids, we have one more economical concern to explore this type of celestial bodies, because the owner or the explorer of these asteroids will be, so when it takes to Earth, it needs to be the main owner of these of those resources. Otherwise, the value of democratization of the exploration of the resources is taken from the asteroid and bringing to Earth will decrease the value of the exploration and make the mission non-cost effective. This is the first concern of exploring mining asteroids. And the second concern about this nationalization of the spacecraft, you have first problem. Let's look to ISS. One module making by Japanese or by Russian, but you consider also the spacesuit is also a spacecraft. So let's consider one astronaut inside his spacesuit that is committing a crime on another module, as we have this example, or the example of this women astronaut that hacked the account of his couple right on Earth. So what kind of boundaries we are establishing on that? We have one person inside his national spacecraft, but inside another module, committing a crime here on Earth, because this case of this woman, he just hacked while in ISS, he hacked the accounts on the ground. And when the women just asked the banker to track the signal source of the person who was hacking, and they just tracked and they just saw that the source of the hacking was International Space Station. So those are some tricky things that we need, as you were talking, we need to first fix. Those gaps need to be fixed and discussed, very well discussed before we start exploring further.
I don't think that's a fair statement. I think if we're going to wait for those laws to be defined, we'll be waiting forever, right? It's more of a, let's do a broad net. You have your bulk of laws that'll capture the bulk of the work. And then as you come up to those issues, you'll have patches. And, that's kind of how law, our legal system, has worked over the years. So I don't think it's a fair statement to say, let's wait, because, I mean,
it's not wait, but we need to define it before, because we have this problem on the first exploration, the first human space, the first exploration, because we have the big countries exploring, for instance, what we call the communication, the orbital position resources. And they just told, okay, the other countries, they don't have capabilities to explore their orbital position. So we will use, while they don't have capability to explore their orbital position. So, and they were just using and exploring those capabilities, and that's what we have. That's what we will have. Those companies that have technical capabilities to explore will explore those gaps in their benefits, and the others, as we are talking more and more in democratization, we are having now the new space. It will be like an unfair exploration if you don't explore these gaps and if you don't solve these gaps, because those companies with the big players will just
keep all the wealth.
kick out the new space. The new space have some things in their benefits, but the big players will use these gaps. We have Luxembourg. We now have United States signing up let me call this counter space activities, so allowing the exploration of celestial bodies.
Artemis Accords, yeah.
Yes, and how about the others? So they use those gaps to tell that they can hone a piece of a celestial body.
I think sorry, Margo, I just want to ask a question. So we know that there are some limited resources on the moon. Let's use water as an example, right?
Yeah.
And so there's a given amount of water on the moon, whatever it is. Like somebody said, maybe it's a third of what Lake Mead holds or something like that. But what do you use it for? Who's going to determine how much water is there, how much of it's usable, and what use it'll be put? We can't literally sit around and wait for somebody to go up there and survey the whole thing and then determine who's going to allocate what to whom, and then figure out what's the best use of it. Is the best use of it to be on the moon? Is the best use of it to go to Mars? Is the best use of it to go out the asteroids? Or should we never use it at all and preserve it for just people living on the moon, because transporting water from Earth to the moon is probably an unrealistic objective. So is it going to be just used for people consuming on the moon? There's a whole lot of stuff that goes on before. We're not even there yet. We're not even close to there yet. And we're already talking about who's going to divvy it up and who's going to sit in judgment of who gets to use it and how it's going to be allocated. And they're fair questions, but I think we're putting the cart before the horse a little bit.
Yeah, that's why I think
so Michael, just to
go step by step, side by side, the technical exploration and the legislation exploration. The same way we are trying to develop systems to exploit water from regolith, or to use all those in situ resources, or to travel to those places. We need at the same time to have law going hand by hand with that. not waiting, but need to go in parallel way.
Hey, Daniel, I think you had a point there.
Oh yeah, just a hypothetical. Have there been any discussions? I don't get too much into all the space policy, but it does concern us from a business perspective, I guess. Is there talk of splitting up those resources? You know, putting aside, like you said, leaving some of the lunar ice, undisturbed for scientific research, and then kind of just divvying it up, kind of like what we did sort of with Antarctica. Is just saying, okay, who are the big spacefaring nations, and okay, you've got a 20 or 30 year, let's kind of divide it up, and we won't take more than this amount, and you won't interrupt our operations in one point here. I mean, it seems like a fair way to use it on our time scale, because I'm looking at a much longer time scale of a lot of this stuff. As some people are, what do we use that water for on the moon? And I think that will rapidly change in 20 or 30 years, those perspectives. And from a country standpoint, okay, you want to take the short-term approach, and other countries take a longer-term approach. I think that might be a way to divide it up.
Because we have even this UK company developing the Azaguno small rover. It is giving like small players the possibility to join big exploration missions, like joining the Artemis program, having a nano rover. They call it Cube rovers. Joining this journey of space exploration. That's why we need to have at least the minimum defined.
Is there anybody who wants to ask a question who hasn't asked one? Drew, I know you've shut off all the video and whatnot, but maybe you're listening. Anybody else? Well, are we good? Should we wrap up there?
We had also the second just group of a part of space situational awareness and legislation. A lot of people talking about space education outreach and analogs. So it will be also a little bit interesting if we have time or in another opportunity to explore a little bit how we can make this kind of approach. Because for me, I'm really interested in supporting those who want to develop according to the things I've been doing so far in Angola, so and to hear more about.
It's kind of an interesting thing, the whole desert aspect of planning for Mars missions or for lunar missions. How would one get involved in, I guess, the organizations you're working with?
Sorry, I didn't.
So how would someone get involved in the organizations that you're working with, where you have the fake settlements, the Martian settlements in the desert? What's the way to get involved? Okay, so for this first time, the first step we are doing now, we are designing the settlements first to deliver sustainable development habitat solutions for disaster management. So we will bring this spatial approach. So how to develop and how to solve some of the issues that space exploration give to us. So those challenges, and when solving that, we will use the Namib Desert as a test bed. For instance, one of the model that's why I told that we have 3 bases in Angola, that there are old bases that were totally transformed inside, and now those bases are like mobile schools. And the first step, one of the first to have this settlement, will be transforming one of those bases in ISS node.
So to explore and to transform it, we'll have different type of skills and knowledge needed to explore that. Geology, biology, space system engineering, architects, all the disciplines to develop, and to even robotics to 3D print some of the parts of habitat. And those are the kind of skills we are trying to put together. First, study space, human space habitats. Second,
Can I make a suggestion, please, Michael? Here in Australia, we have really big mining companies who have very large open cut mines, which they are required to rehabilitate, which are an approximate of a crater, basically, in space. So ideal to actually organize space habitats or in their rehabilitation to look at actually land development, residential or hospital buildings. And it can be very nice for space preparation if the mining is actually going on at the same time as you've got these accommodation constructions happening. So I've got Glencore interested here in Australia in doing that. They already, because underground mining, most of our stuff off the surface has been taken, and there's more and more underground mining, which is extremely dangerous. So they're using more and more robotics. There's big mines in the Pilbara in Western Australia who actually run out of Perth because it's all done virtually now with robotics and drones and the like. So you might want to look at a collaboration with a big mining company. They're interested in the robotics. They're looking at the rehabilitation of these sites and how they can all mesh together. Yeah, just a suggestion.
Yes. If you have the name of or the way to reach them, it will be
Glencore's a very big mining company. I'm sure if you've got Glencore operating in your country, just approach the corporate affairs officer at Glencore. They are very interested because they're looking at transitioning to space mining.
Because we had very near to us in Mozambique. We have in contact. We were in contact with some people that they 3D printed all resorts, so a very big resort. All the houses were 3D printed using resources that they were like the Gindas are 3D printed with the 3-axis, like we have desktop 3D printers. And those are some of the reference we are using, because Africa, we have only, let's talk about 2 to 3 analogs, but not well defined at all.
You might, may I further suggest then you might want to contact some of the big oil companies, because plastics come out of oils. Mixing the oil as a binder with the regolith for the 3D construction. So you might be able to get oil companies to support you as well. They certainly wanted to sort of try and, given the problem with fossil fuels, they would still like to, that would be like carbon capture basically.
Yeah, and Angola, we had just very huge expansion in terms of oil and gas, and now we are, so with the crisis, it will be also a very good thing, so they can start looking on alternative ways to go through not only the oil and gas exploration directly, but those are very good. I just take notes and I will just do that.
Well, Chevron's already in that space, so I can tell you Glencore for the mining and Chevron. That's an oil company.
We have direct contact with the Chevron because it's not related to space, but I'm the responsible, the director of Fencing Federation, technical director of the Fencing Federation in Angola, because I'm a federated athlete. And Chevron has a closer approach to support the fencing and handball in Angola. So we have most of these. We talk with them, and me and Audrey, we are here in Toulouse. So we are in France. That is the heart of Chevron. So it will be probably a good way to this approach, as we will be working on the next 6 months with the Aerospace Valley on the development of this Angolan ecosystem, new space ecosystem. So it will be our work for the next 6 months. Create all the conditions and study all the conditions to implement a new space ecosystem in an underdevelopment country like Angola. So all the things we need to create, like hackathons, the organize acting space, push the startups, present like proof of concepts to the government, to show them the potential of space. All the things we'll bring together on what we call like a manual of a survival kits if you want to implement the space domain in your country in a most disruptive way, with cooperation, with internal or external cooperation. So we will take all those advice in account. We'll just
3D printing and designing those space accommodations. You want to work, which is what I'll be doing soon, is the aged care, because the sensors and the design needs to accommodate the kind of health problems which actually older people have. The astronauts will have these bone density and vision problems. So you're designing an aged care facility, and the sensors and basic ergonomics of that architecture, then you've got a win-win there. So you can get people who are specialists in age health problems to help you with the design of the architecture.
All right, folks. Well, we've been on for an hour and 20 minutes. I would say leave them wanting more, although I do tend to let these things run for a long time. So I want to thank you all for being here. Those of you who had to stay up later, get up early, especially so. Email me, I guess, or message me on LinkedIn with comments, you know, what you liked, what you didn't like, if you want to do another of these again. I will email around the list from that form of everybody who signed up. There's more people who submitted their contact info to the form than were here, so that's cool. And feel free to meet up with anybody here. And thanks a lot for being here. I will email around also the video for this when it's up later. Thanks a lot, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks for setting this up.
All right.
Nice meeting you all.
Thank you. Nice meeting you.
I think I'll go back to bed now. It's very early.